All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming to the Deep Tech Summit today, put on by Utah Business and Altitude Labs. I'm Elle Griffin. I'm the editor-in-chief of Utah Business. I just want to thank you guys so much for being here. We are, as a publication, trying to focus a lot on the tech and especially the science and technology sectors. So if any of you do have any amazing stories in healthcare, in biotech, and life sciences, please send those to me. Our email address for the editors is editor@utahbusiness.com, and we do run 4 biotech stories a month. So we're constantly looking for stories of all the cool businesses in this area and space. So thank you so much for being here. I also want to let you know that if you do want to receive the print publication of Utah Business, we're offering a year free for everybody who's attending today. So if you just go to utahbusiness.com and go to subscribe, you can use the promo code DEEPTECH and get 1 year free of the print publication. Thank you all so much for being here. I also want to thank our sponsors, Altitude Lab, for hosting us in this amazing space, and also Nori and Ostrich, who they're over there. They can tell you more about what they're doing. And now I just want to introduce our host, Chandana Hawk, who is the executive director with Altitude Labs. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Elle. A little tangled over here. Rock and roll. All right, tech culture has infiltrated Utah. I'm sure you've felt it. When I say that, some of you might think of Silicon Slopes or the hundreds of tech companies that line the interstate down to Provo. What I think of is Utah's investment into the technologies to address climate change, healthcare access, Alzheimer's and cancer, sustainable farming and transportation, and space exploration. This is what we call deep tech. Deep tech uses engineering and scientific advances to interact with the physical world and create tangible societal shifts. Simply put, deep tech aims to change how we all live without ever selling you a product directly. My name is Chandana Hawk. I'm executive director of Altitude Lab. Altitude Lab is a healthcare startup incubator focused on supporting minorities and women leaders and helping them lead in this sector. At Altitude Lab, we aim to build a pipeline of diverse innovators right here in Utah. We do this by focusing in on our mission. We emphasize the support of underestimated founders to break gender and racial barriers right at the beginning of startup founding. By doing so, we break information silos that limit these groups from participating in entrepreneurship. At Altitude Lab, 80% of our companies are led by minorities and women. They exemplify that entrepreneurs can come from any background. The second way we do this is by structure. Right at the beginning, we've decided against private offices. Instead, our program is completely co-working. For 24 months, our founders experience a cohort effect here at Altitude. With simple acts like eating lunch and asking each other for help in the lab, our founders have built a co-working-like community. The last is bridging communities. We bring a constant flow of CXOs and experts to share their tribal knowledge on building a biotech. We've also created a coalition of national investors that mentor our teams 40 days a year so that our founders have a national pulse on capital markets. Bridging communities brings us right back to this event here today. Altitude Lab focuses on healthcare startups, but as it turns out, biotech and healthcare has had its biggest strides when taking an interdisciplinary approach. Today, biologists adopt strategies developed in physics, computer science, and material science to identify new drug targets and deliver those therapies efficaciously. You might remember that 30 years ago, we aspired to sequence the whole human genome. This was with the hope that understanding our genetics would help us identify the root causes of disease. This audacious goal spurred on the inventions of faster, cheaper desktop DNA sequencers. It also created a market for computational techniques and software that made sense of those thousands of mutations and help you share them with your family and doctors. The learnings from the Human Genome Project equipped us to use DNA in new ways. And that is exactly an example of how interdisciplinary deep tech can have broad impacts. Now we can use DNA as a data storage platform, kind of like a microscopic USB stick. Or we can manipulate it and manipulate the microbial ecosystem in our soil, encouraging richer, better, and higher yield crops in agriculture. We can even genetically modify bacteria to capture more carbon in the air, thus reducing carbon emissions that our children and future generations will live with. This is the promise of deep tech, the promise to alter the course of fundamental problems facing humanity. So while I'm always excited for a good TikTok or a better way to get takeout and order takeout on Uber Eats, when I'm talking about tech, I'm talking about how we're paving a future with science. Here's how our founders at Altitude Lab are building that future today. Jordan, video.
What we're trying to build here is actually addressing and building on the global health economy. We understand that diversity can be an engine for innovation. At Altitude Lab, we're serving this specific point in a founder's journey, that place where you need the lab space and the office space just to get that proof of concept, that feasibility data to get you from idea, blackboard concept, to a funded company. If we build founders and get them the resources they need, everything else follows suit. That's what's most exciting about Altitude Lab, is that we're bringing these tremendous people, these tremendous technologies into one space. The collisions and the ideas that come out of that are just, it's going to change how we do life science.
Today, I'm so honored to host two panels of extraordinary scientists, leaders, and visionaries, all working to solve global problems using deep tech. You might have noticed that they all happen to be women. When we looked for the brightest minds leading change, it was a really good feeling to see and find women at the helm. I hope you'll learn as much as I have from this incredible ensemble we've brought to you today. With that, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Jack Boren. Jack Boren is the managing director at Epic Ventures. He's a career venture capitalist with a passion for identifying and backing visionary entrepreneurs. As a founding member of our investor coalition here at Altitude Lab, Jack frequently works with our founders to support their growth of early stage startups. Please help me welcome Jack.
All right, how's that? Welcome, everyone. It's a privilege to be here. Really appreciate the opportunity to be among you. I'm the least interesting person you'll hear from today. So excited to hear from everybody else. We have a fantastic panel coming up today. Let me make sure I don't mess up anybody's names. I'm going to pull up my prompts here. First off, we have Linda Cabrales. She's a director at the Utah Innovation Center. Now, Linda, are you? Oh, there we go. Well, as I call out your name, let's have everybody move up to the front. And sorry, is this super loud? How are we doing here? Is that good? Sounds very loud to me. Hey, Linda, how are you? Thanks for being here. Next up, we have Laura Pace. She's the co-founder and CEO of the Metrodora Institute. Hey, Laura. Next, we have Angela Trago, the Director of Science and Technology at the Utah Advanced Materials and Manufacturing Initiative. Hey, Angela. And finally, we have Mandy Rogers, the Director of Systems Engineering at Northrop Grumman. Hey, Mandy, how are you? We're sorry to miss Lena Nilsson today. She was unable to attend. But Lena, if you're watching from abroad, we hope you're doing well. Well, to start us off, I want to take kind of an unconventional approach mixed in with just general introductions. Obviously, my little one-liners won't provide much context for the crowd here of who you are and why you're part of the panel. So I want to take 3 prompts for each of you, and we'll just kind of pass the mics down the way. Actually, yeah, we'll pass the mics down the way, starting with you, Mandy. So the 3 prompts, if you're comfortable with it, and by starting, I mean I'll start us off and then we'll pass to you. In one sentence, what does your company do? Second, what is your role in the company? And then third, What's your favorite animal?
I love this. So Northrop Grumman is a really diverse company. We really do lead across multi-domain, air, space, land, and across the ecosystem of technology, which is super cool. I have the privilege of being a system engineering director within our space systems sector, so we do a lot of really cool stuff. I, in particular, get to lead a really diverse team of engineers and not engineers that want to help out with engineering challenges from a DevSecOps perspective as well as architecture perspective. So we take capability from conception to reality via model-based system engineering and blueprinting the design of a very complex system iteratively. We then code and develop hardware that we integrate to demonstrate that early capability. And then we integrate towards the field, towards you launch test events, which is super cool. So we really get that mission connectivity, and then folks that are on my team and across the company really get to see how their work supports real capability in the field. For my favorite animal, it's really hard to choose. I'm a huge animal lover, but mythical creatures, definitely a unicorn or a porg from the Star Wars universe. But I'm definitely a cat lover. So those are some of my favorite things.
Thank you, Mandy.
I don't know how I can beat a unicorn. My name is Angela Trigo with UAMI, and we are a federally and state-funded consortium working on the development and integration and support of advanced manufacturing and materials initiatives inside the state of Utah. So basically, we work with whether you're public, private, small, large, educational system, or a company in bringing together and working and integrating to help you build up your organization and build up your technology capability. Utah is an amazing state with a lot of benefits and help, and we are actually a free resource for organizations for that. I am Director of Science and Technology, and I kind of have a dual role. My first role is working with actually integration of organizations together, helping, my background, I'm a rocket scientist. And so working with large organizations, but helping smaller organizations. Sounds like we have an alert going on, Amber Alert. But I go through and work especially with a lot of small businesses and helping them find ways to become suppliers for larger organizations such as Northrop Grumman and Boeing. My other role is that I'm extremely passionate about is recruitment and retention of women in technical fields. And my favorite animal is a tiger.
I'm Laura Pace. I am a founder and CEO of Metrodora. Metrodora Institute is a multidisciplinary destination medical clinic and really innovative research initiative in the space of neuroimmune disorders. We are a new medical startup. We are located here in Utah. We will be open in October. And, you know, as I said, sort of like the founder and CEO is sort of like my official title, but in this space, I feel as though my role is much greater than that. And that's because these neuroimmune disorders that Metrodora is focused on, they affect both the nervous system and the immune system. But their symptoms oftentimes can be incredibly vague, non-specific. They can affect multiple body systems. And what has occurred within our medical system as it exists today is that it's incredibly siloed by specialties that focus on organ systems. And so when you have conditions that affect multiple organ systems, you don't have a clinician champion. And so what has happened for these invisible illnesses is that there's been no federal funding or very little federal funding that actually prioritizes solving for these conditions. And I'll just give you an example. 80% of those living with an autoimmune condition are women, right? And in 2022, we can't tell you why, right? And we should. And the reason we can't tell you is because we haven't prioritized it. And so what we're doing at Metrodora is we're leveraging the power of technology to massively accelerate research in this space so that in a couple of years, we can tell you why. My favorite animal, I have to agree. I love all animals, but I'm going to go with dogs.
Okay, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So I work with the Utah Innovation Center. We're part of the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. And our office specifically helps small businesses, and I would say the majority are startups, access non-dilutive funding through a federal program. So it's researchers who are doing, and small businesses who need research and development funding. And so I'm the director of the office. I've been with the state of Utah since, as of the 18th, it was 9 years, which is hard for me to believe. I went away from this office and worked for YouStar, which was an initiative here in the state of Utah, and then came back to this office. So it's my pleasure to be here. And my favorite animal, like I grew up in Utah County, and if you can believe at one point there was a rural part of Utah County. And when I grew up, we actually were in a rural community in West Jordan, and so we had all kinds of animals, but I still am a sucker for a dog. We had this little bus stop, and it was winter, and this little dog was roaming around. Somebody must have dropped it off, and it got on the bus, and I made a commitment that if that dog was still around when I got home, I was convincing my parents that it was mine, and I did.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. For the record, my favorite animal is the graceful puffin. We can debrief on that later. Anyway, great introductions. I think one of the main things to highlight before we jump into the questions here is we have a really interesting partnership of public and private focused individuals here. So really excited to hear your perspectives. Our first topic we'd like to discuss actually comes from, to some degree, Chandana's introduction, and that is, what is deep tech? And if you look at the prompt and the overall title of this conversation, it's what is deep tech and how is innovation in this sector going to drive, trends that will define the next century. I'll get that right. So I'm just going to pause on that first. What is deep tech? And most specifically, how does each of your companies fit into it?
I'll take this one. So to me, deep tech is really leveraging the power of technology to solve hard problems. And so biology is a series of really hard problems. It's incredibly complex, it's interconnected, and so it's a systems biology problem that actually the human brain can't solve on its own. And so we have to implement technological tools to be able to help us understand biology better. And in doing so, we're going to be able to understand medicine better. And so I'm going to give you just a couple of examples because, technology is often applied to data, right? And so with the healthcare industry really being a $4 trillion component of our economic sector, there's a lot of data there, right? But it's actually not all equivalent. And so the great majority of data in sort of like healthcare and medicine actually resides in our electronic health records. So these are sort of the data platforms that when you go see a clinician, they enter in sort of all of the information about you and the visit and why you're there and, what are the next steps. But these platforms were actually built not as data collection tools. They were built as billing platforms. And as such, the data that resides within these platforms isn't actually very useful for advancing our understanding of biology. And so we have to be, cognizant of that when we're designing studies and trying to understand these really complex systems. The other thing is that when we're utilizing some latest technologies in science that we're applying to maybe like a biological sample, right? What we've discovered is that how you collect that sample, how you process that sample, and how you store that sample all affects the integrity of that sample. And so then when we're generating data from these samples, if we haven't collected it the same, processed it the same, stored it the same, we actually can't compare data across those different samples. And so what we're doing at Metrodora is really sort of being intentional about how we collect data from our patients. We are collecting it in the same way. We are collecting objective data to remove the noise out of sort of all the biases that exist in the electronic health records, such as what your clinician knew about your disorder, right? If they've never heard of it, about it, which happens for invisible illnesses, they'll give you a diagnosis that's actually not meaningful. We're also creating the infrastructure to collect biological samples in a highly standardized and rigorous way so that then when we utilize those samples for future research studies, the data is actually comparable. And so we really are leveraging the power of technology to really move the space forward for patients in this sort of kind of neglected space of healthcare.
To build off of that a little bit. Can you hear me? Okay. To build off of that a little bit, I like to think of deep tech as really the platform of being able to innovate and create where we previously couldn't, right? There's high technology risk, but now we're at a point in the ecosystem of technology and engineering where we can do things that weren't possible 5, 10, 20 years ago. So how do we take all those innovations and start from that new amplified benchmark and take that complexity and start driving towards new technical solutions, right? I think at Northrop Grumman, one of the really cool things that is recently all over the news is the James Webb Space Telescope, right? And that is a super cool invention and awesome partnership with NASA that I think everyone is super stoked about to see that launch and actually get out to the ecosystem of space successfully, right? I can't imagine supporting that and actually seeing your baby in space. But that was a huge, really complex system that without some of our digital ecosystem, some of our innovations in partnership with NASA, we wouldn't have been able to do 20 years ago. And so that's super cool to see. We're going to explore space. We're going to discover probably new elements. We're going to discover new facts about life and human life and exploration to help make the future better. So I'm thrilled. It's super cool to talk about deep tech in so many different aspects and how really that's going to help the human ecosystem and how we can make life better on the planet and beyond.
I'll quickly go and then Angie can. So I think when I think of deep tech, you can think of what it's not, right? So it's not like if you're developing an app, that's quick usually if you know what you're doing. But when you think of the things that are based on science and engineering, where you're finding difficult things and you're finding those technologies that can help respond to those. And what I love about the program that we support, so it's called SBIR, STTR. Has anyone heard of that before? I know a few of you have. Josh has done that, and Olga. Small Business Innovation Research. So it's a program that's been around for 40 years. With the two programs, it's about $4 billion giving annually to small businesses across the country for research and development. And it is all about, sometimes there's 11 agencies, but it's all about cutting edge technology. It's about looking to the future and saying, what can we do? What can create? And so that's what all of this is. And when I think of deep tech, that's where it's heading.
Yeah, to kind of follow along that, one of the initiatives of UAMI is finding methodologies and ways to support the small business to be able to create things in a faster pace and test things out, prototype systems. I don't look very old, but I am really old. When I worked at Boeing, I remember when they cut out plywood to put together the airplane and make sure all the parts fit, et cetera, right? That's gone by the wayside now to some extent, but not as much as you would think, especially in the space program areas. And so finding methodologies and ways to be able to do nanotechnology and to be able to do computer simulations and methodologies, to be able to allow you to not even have to build parts while you're testing, really that helps remove a lot of the barriers for some of the entrepreneurs and smaller companies and startups to be able to develop this technology. And so, how do we become revolutionary instead of evolutionary in our methodologies? To me, it's allowing this technology, whether it's now new big data and being able to analyze lots of data, whether it's these different entities and methodologies, but really finding these ways to help support deep tech is just really critical, I think, to help support that ecosystem.
I'm taking notes over here. This is a fantastic conversation. I just want to I want to repeat some of the lovely things that were said here. So Laura said, it's leveraging technology to solve hard problems. Mandy said, creating what we previously couldn't, which I think is just a fascinating thought there. High technology risk, we'll unpack that in a minute. Linda, it's not like developing an app. It's not easy. We do a lot of, light software investing. I take a little offense to that.
I knew I would offend someone, but that's part of the conversation.
Revolutionary, not evolutionary. That was a buzzword there. Thank you, Angela. That was great. Mandy, if you don't mind, I would love to unpack what you said here. High technology risk. It's a really interesting phrase here. And I live in a world on the investment side where it's a lot. The world's a lot easier if there's not high technology risk. And to our conversation about apps and lighter software platforms, it's easier for investors to get on board there. I don't know if I have a perfectly specific question here, but maybe can you pontificate a little bit on your perspectives of the impacts of high technology risk in maybe business innovation and startups?
Absolutely. So I think in prior decades, I'm the clumsy one, so I'm glad I didn't knock that over. In previous decades, I think there were a lot of opportunities to reduce risk, and that really, I would say, limited certain domains from making the progression that it should have made. And so I really pride myself on building mission-centric teams. I think if you understand the mission and the warfighters or whatever domain that you're supporting, and you're really partnering very closely with them, you start to reduce that risk because you start thinking like your end user of your technology or what type of missions you're actually going to solve. I know some of you in the room might be able to see my Chuck Taylors. I don't know. It looks like it might be caught on video if folks are online. But we actually embrace in this large company a more modern approach to technology innovation. So breaking down those complex problems and iterating very quickly where there might be high risk, where we can digitize, simulate, prototype with a small amount of energy and effort and labor very quickly where we couldn't before, and make sure that we either reduce risk, fail fast, and discover we can't go down this path and learn some from that, or very quickly create those small innovations that we can then determine if we can scale or not. So it's important to reduce that risk, but it's important to also have a little bit of risk so you can do what can't be done previously.
Yeah, I mean, it's really to build on what you said, sort of in the biology and healthcare space, it looks like we're taking a risk by taking the time to generate really high quality data sets. But honestly, we're just setting ourselves all up for success. Because we have the technology already to analyze these data sets. And what we can do is sort of enter into a phase of sort of non-hypothesis driven research, right, at this point. And so we can use our technologies to ask the data to tell us things. So we can extract insights that allow us to then create hypotheses and test. But the key is that foundational data. And we're going to be able to move so much faster and be more agile when we have a really solid foundation. And, to your point, you'll know very quickly this isn't going to work, and then you sort of pivot. But you still have all of that infrastructure in place, and there's going to be so many insights that come from that.
Building off the Agile comment, I realized I didn't clarify my Chuck Taylor's comment. It says impact, and this is going to be buzzword soup, but innovation, mission, partnership, Agile, collaboration, and technology. That's a process that we created to take some of the best practices from, Silicon Valley, industry, commercial, and weave those together to solve those complex cyber physical problems. So taking a lot of that agility, continuous integration, continuous development, discovery, fail fast, and truly mechanizing that while maintaining that rigor in complex system engineering, complex digital engineering, and modeling and sim. So I wanted to clarify that because I realized I pointed it out and didn't spell it out for folks.
Quick side note here. We at Epic need to really rethink our swag decisions. This is fantastic.
Yes, they're great.
Linda, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to hear your perspectives here vis-a-vis, call it capitalizing these startups at innovation, if you will, at an early stage with high risk, with longer tails to, to business opportunities, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. So the great thing about the programs that we work with is it is all about high risk. I mean, it's things like when you think of GPS. I don't know how I got here today. We use GPS. I don't know if anybody else knew where they were going, but GPS was developed under an SBIR program through DARPA. But this was years ago before we even knew that it was available. So many of the technologies that we use today were developed under this SBIR program that we support. So when you think in the future of what might be possible, I mean, that's the kind of projects that these federal agencies are looking to support. And what our office does is support small businesses in Utah, mostly startups, find that research and development funding. So it's before maybe you have a little bit of preliminary data, maybe you know that it's going to work, but it's about a proof of concept. So you have an opportunity to explore new technologies that are high risk, and then you can come in and get this funding for a phase 1 project. It's about $250,000. I mean, they keep changing that a little bit. And then for a phase 2, it can be up to $2 million, depending on the agency. So again, it's giving you that funding, and it also, I would say, helps you with investors, because once you've been vetted by the federal government and you've been proven, it shows that you've really got something. You've been able to prove something. You've convinced the federal government, and so I think investors are much more likely to look at you.
If you don't mind, maybe a point of clarification. So say I'm a founder and I've taken on some traditional venture funding from somebody like Epic Ventures. Does that preclude me from having access to some of these grants?
So you just need to keep at least 51% ownership by individuals. There are a few of the agencies that have a few opportunities if you have hedge funds and things like that, but the key is just keeping majority ownership.
Great. Angela, if you don't mind, I'd love to put you on the spot. It sounds like the way you've structured your organization is probably very well positioned to help out in some of these longer tail innovation type cycles. Can you maybe weigh in on how you're able to help speed up innovation in the early stages?
Yeah, certainly. One of the things we do is we actually work with your organization quite a lot. For example, we just had a small organization develop it was a man-powered VTOL. And they just received their phase 2 funding and are moving forward to create that, which is pretty exciting. We have a couple of different options and opportunities. Not only do we work with organizations for SBIRs and STTRs, teaming with a lot of the universities, but we also have a program called RAMP, which goes through and mentoring and working with organizations specifically in advanced manufacturing and material initiatives, supporting them with a lot of the problem from our end is that we have great engineers that understand the technology, but they don't have a clue about how to get funding and how to make a profit on it. And so the RAMP program works through this idea of creating the business case, Utah Manufacturing Education Program, which is also a state-sponsored program, to go through with these entities to be able to give them some of the business acumen to understand. And then we also have technical experts that go in and support them. And we create a mentoring program to help provide support on that access.
So there's a broader question I'd love to unpack here that you just touched on, and that's maybe the relationship between an innovation team, right, the technology team, and bringing in call it more of a business-oriented go-to-market type team as well. And I'm hearing some interesting perspectives here, Mandy, if you don't mind. Everything from maybe just early collaboration between the two teams on your end. And I'm sure there are other ideas as well. But I'd love to hear your perspective on how you structure your teams, and then down the group as well, how you think about those early collaborations.
This is probably one of my favorite topics. I actually look for high energy collaborators who, have some technical experience or not technical experience even. We have some non-engineers on my team that are working towards engineering solutions, but I really look for not only gender or race diversity, but diversity of thought. Where were people raised? What backgrounds do they have? I have engineers on my team that have worked in the cyber domain. I've had, aerospace engineers. I've had electrical engineers, just any kind of engineer you can think of and non-engineer. We actually have someone who came from business management who works with a lot of numbers and data, and they're helping us solve some really complex technical challenges. So I really look to build those super diverse teams that have that motivation and want to solve hard problems together. And that's worked really well. I think empowering them at all altitudes to bring not only challenges, but solutions to each other and be able to innovate and say, yes, and let's go do this. Let's try it. Okay, you're empowered to go do that is super important to me. I think you grow a lot of leaders and grow their breadth and depth at all altitudes, at the individual contributor level, as well as like the leadership level, and just cross-pollination as well. So I never put any of my team members into a box. They are allowed, even if they're a non-engineer, to go work on model-based engineering and solve some hard problems. If they're a cyber engineer, sometimes I put them on non-engineering problems and they can bring different perspectives. So I think it's super important to have those high potential teams with very diverse backgrounds and very diverse educations so you can get that diversity of thought to solve those hard problems. And I've had a lot of success in that. And I really enjoy becoming that self-recruiting team where people want to be part of that team and they want to solve that next challenge. We even have some of our customers partnering very closely with us and co-locating with us and performing some of that digital engineering. And they get super excited about it too. So it's really cool to have mission partners, to have engineers at all maturations of experience and non-engineers as well, solving some of the world's most challenging problems.
That was awesome. And any other thoughts?
I think our approach to solving sort of the hard problems as well brings together teams. And so our chief scientific officer at Metrodora, his background is actually in physics, but we're asking him to solve biology problems. And it's because we need to bring sort of new perspectives and new ideas and new approaches and different technical skills. And I also think that, physicians aren't necessarily positioned to be leaders in this space because that's just not their training. And so bringing in scientists, but having them collaborate with physicians who are seeing things clinically to kind of put together that team that has two different perspectives, I think is really powerful. And that's sort of, our approach.
I was also thinking with the companies that we work with, a lot of times it's a one-person show. And that one person is trying to do everything because they don't have funding. They just have this amazing idea. And so it's very important for them to build out a team. And I love the idea that it's diverse, right? So you get someone that thinks differently than you, that looks at something differently, that has different expertise. And so that's what we encourage the companies that we work with to do. And a lot of times this funding, you propose who your team's going to be, but you don't have to actually bring them on until you're awarded. And so you look for those individuals and the type of expertise you need and then bring them on. And then the other interesting thing about this program is it's all about research and development. So while you need that business person, that isn't paid for under an SBIR, but there's other types of funding that you can use. And so knowing someone like you might be the amazing scientist that has it all figured out, but you might not understand the business side. How am I going to bring this to market? Because it is all about commercialization, that you also align yourself with people that can help you there.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the same lines. UAMI does not actually generate or create any product in and of itself. We are just a facilitator. And so certainly our job is to take these one-off individuals and make that connection and try and say, okay, you're interested, you're a physicist, but we need somebody that has this other expertise, or you need additional research or something like that. So that's our job, is really to help do that and create that diversity. I know this is maybe another topic, but kind of along those same lines, one of the things that we've taken an initiative for is actually finding ways to educate and increase that STEM pipeline. Because at the end of the day, we need to get more people into this state that can actually be qualified to be working in these higher paying and really cool deep tech jobs.
I want to spend a lot of time there, actually, if you don't mind. It's a perfect segue into another topic. And that's just talent in general, right? Everything from fostering the earliest, mental development all the way to hiring and retaining current talent. Anybody willing to share some thoughts and perspectives of how your organizations are, working across that span of issues?
Yeah, so I'm going to head with asking who in the audience is not in biotech? Okay, so that's good. One of the things that I find encouraging is that in biotech, if you look at a diversity statistic, it's now going into biotech engineering is about 50-50 men to women, which is pretty exciting. Now you go to mechanical engineering, which is what I am, and it's about 11% in the world. You go to computer science, it's about 8% women. So, we're talking about diversity, but there's certainly, right? If you've got 50 women in biotech, you do have more people trying to at least go into biotech than you do into these harder core defense, aerospace sides of activities. And so really it's working with the younger generation to touch their heart, right? So I can say my career is one of two ways. I can say, hey, I worked for the Boeing company and I built fighters and missiles and, worked on fighter jets and spacecraft. Or I can say, my name's Dr. Angela Trigo and I protected lives and I saved lives. I helped facilitate cancer treatments, right? That's a big difference. Big difference. To me, it's getting kids the ability to see what possibilities they have, that they can work in deep tech that's going to have these huge, magnificent changes on how we live. And working with faculty members. I go out and train at high schools and universities on how teachers can be better teachers, teaching with, quite honestly, with heart and engagement to try and help facilitate that pipeline.
So, and I'll add a little bit. So as part of the governor's office, many of you know, probably all know that our governor is he is from rural Utah. And he even changed the name of our organization, which used to be GOED, or Governor's Office of Economic Development, to Go Utah, Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. So his goal is to have opportunity for everyone throughout the state. So we have a lot going on along the Wasatch Front. There's a lot of opportunity, but he would like to see more opportunity for everyone across the state. And so when you think about, we have people out there, we have opportunities, and so they want to develop resources for everyone across the state. And so when you think of talent, we all started, or many of us could remote work during the pandemic. And what was interesting is the state of Utah had actually piloted a program for remote work before the pandemic even came, which I thought was amazing, like serendipity there. So there were many of us already set up where we could work from home if that was, if we could. Not everyone can. But there's also some programs like Talent Ready Utah that's an opportunity where there's career pathways for students coming out of high schools who can get into other types of careers. I mean, there's all kinds of opportunities. And so I think that's the governor's mission, is to make sure that we have a full workforce, that everybody has the opportunity that they're looking for.
Yeah, and I think I'll just follow with, I think a trend in healthcare that we're seeing is the estimates are that 50% of people will actually change jobs in the next year. And this is actually very different than historically we've seen. But I think it's because people really want to be a part of something bigger. They want to be a part of change. They want to be a part of something that means something, that has true impact. And so, we've heard that, and that is the way we've intentionally created Metrodora, is because we are actually solving really hard problems. We're solving two. One is a care deficit for patients who are marginalized by the current medical system. It disproportionately impacts women, right? And then in order to really change that care model, we actually have to create the solution for research and better understanding, so we can develop better tests and we can have better therapeutics and work towards cures. And so that's how we're positioning ourselves. And to Mandy, to your point, is that I don't want to limit people who join us, right? Like I want the people who are the visionaries and want to be part of something and sort of create. And we are a small enough organization that we can adapt to those types of feedback that we get from people and sort of those visions. And so that's really important to us.
We are definitely in an interesting time for talent, recruitment and retention, right? And we are a very large company. I think building off of what Angela said, we really have to lead with heart and with just empathy. And we're seeing now that people are a bit more risk adverse of switching jobs, switching careers, switching domains, doing something that they hadn't done before in their career. And now people have lived through a pandemic. So it's kind of like, hey, why not? Maybe I can become a rocket scientist too. What's the worst that could happen, right? And so we're seeing that shift. And I think it opens up the door to a lot more diversity of, again, building off of deep tech. What can we do next if we bring someone who's not a rocket scientist in the rocket science field and have them think about these hard problems? I really enjoy getting into early STEM engagement and just inspiring people, doing robotics. I did a bit of robotics in college, and so I just love being able to go and teach someone in the elementary, middle school arena how exciting it is to do electrical, mechanical, software-related domains. I am a computer engineer by education, and I went from a program where over 100 people were enrolled and only 11 of us graduated with an engineering degree, and I was the only female. And so I'm looking around like, why isn't there anybody like me? And so I really want to give back and make sure that especially young women, when they get told you can't be an engineer because it's too hard, they get that power and that passion ignited them to say, no, it's not too hard for me. I can do this too. It's really not that hard. You just break it down into small building blocks and teach them that critical thinking of take it one bite at a time, right? One piece at a time until you get to the complexity level of the solution. But I'm really inspired by that because that happened to me. And I was told many times that it was too hard for me or I couldn't be an engineer, and that ignited a spark in me, and I want to give back. And so I try to reach out as much as I can and at all altitudes. And I often find that, having mentees at a younger age, they often are teaching me new things. So I think that mentorship relationship also becomes this bi-directional exchange where I'm sharing my life insights with them, but then they're sharing so much more back to me and opening up the doors of possibility of what, they might be able to experience. So it's been a pretty cool opportunity to get to impact a number of folks and really amplify that passion.
I'm not sure how to phrase a prompt around this, but I really love that you highlighted the necessity of kind of the mentor-mentee relationship, particularly at a younger age. But I mean, for me, it's been important throughout my career as well. Anybody have additional thoughts around that specific, thought? Apologies, I don't have a prompt on this. I just love that you said it.
Yeah, I think it's so amazing now when I think of everything going on, because when I was, younger and going through this, I remember like if I got high enough on my ACT, I didn't have to take any more math or science or whatever. And I'm like, and I really wasn't encouraged. And in college, I was on a communications scholarship. And so they loved if you chose a communications major. And I don't think at that point, I didn't have somebody really pushing me. So I went along with what they said, but I wish I would have pursued more, where now I feel like there's so many opportunities. The Women Tech Council, many of you may know about that. They do a She Tech Explorer Day. And so they invite these young girls to come to this day, and they have mentors and they give them a scientific challenge. And this year, the challenge was with everything, the fake news, when you looked at Ukraine and everything going on and people were just playing games and showing missiles and they said, oh, that's over in Ukraine. They said, how do you attack that? And so these girls that I had a chance to mentor, they went around and figured out a solution of how would they determine, what was real and what wasn't. And so there's so many opportunities. And so I love the idea that we can mentor these young people and encourage them that anything is possible. I was told anything was possible, but also there were these limits, there were these caps on what was expected and what isn't expected. And I think now the roof is off. So I'm excited about that.
Kind of to follow along these lines, I think it's important, especially women tend to, although all individuals, as they get to certain levels, but it does happen more to women and underrepresented populations, imposter syndrome. And one of the biggest things to overcome imposter syndrome is having a mentor. That's somebody that you trust, that, like Mandy, I was the only woman in any of my college classes. I was the only woman to graduate. In fact, I was the first woman to graduate from BYU with my PhD in mechanical engineering. When I went to the Boeing company, I was one girl out of 200 engineers, right? I'm always looking, going, where's somebody that looks like me? And there's lots of naysayers. But the important part is that I had mentors. And it's not that I had a female mentor either, right? But I found somebody that I trusted in and developed that relationship so I could go to him and say, okay, this is what I'm feeling. I feel like oh my gosh, people are going to find out that I don't know how to do that differential calculus as well as everybody else. What's going to happen, right? And they were able to say, no, first off, everybody feels that way. Or, you know what, you're better at that than you think. I became an expert in some areas at the Boeing company. And it's like, no, you need to take charge of that because you own that and you developed it. And so you should be confident in that. And so it's really important that as you're looking and growing, it doesn't matter what phase you're in. I'm on the latter half of my career, but I still have mentors and people that I work with, and I pick mentors for different things. Is it a skill that I'm trying to develop? I find somebody with that skill. If it's somebody that I need to understand male-female dynamics or whatever that is, find somebody that can do that for you. But I really strongly believe that the second half of that is make sure that you're also mentoring somebody and helping along the ways, especially as a woman in technical fields, being able to help give back. And it truly is a symbiotic relationship where you grow just as much as them.
I actually really want to peel back. You talked about imposter syndrome, and I just talked about mentor-mentee relationships. Ironically, early in my career, I suffered from imposter syndrome, and I had no idea. I was very scared to ask questions. I was around all these folks that had decades of experience, and I was just scared, and it was really limiting my ability to produce, engineering solutions. I had a young male mentee say, I think you have imposter syndrome. And then I became kind of obsessed researching, and I was like, yeah, you know what? I could do this. It's not that hard. Everyone's learning. Even these SMEs that have 30 years of experience, they're learning along the way too. And it took a lot of time and just reflecting on imposter syndrome that a mentee shared with me and exposed me to build up the confidence in myself and actually be able to execute. So that's something that we need to start, just making it very visible, because if you don't know that you're capable or that you might be, having this thing called imposter syndrome, you might not be able to break that habit of being so scared and so shy and inside your own head that you can't produce. And I thought that was really interesting. That's one really specific example I can think back on where a mentee really helped me as a mentor.
That was awesome. Thank you. It's really great insights here. Let's leave that part of the conversation there because it's such a great finish to it. And let's transfer over to our last two prompts are about the field at large. But prior to that, specific to Utah, what's it like leading deep tech organizations here? What are some of the benefits and maybe setbacks of our ecosystem? What can we improve on, and what are we already great at?
I guess because I have a microphone, I'll start. Utah's great. I love Utah. I am not Utahn. I have chosen to live here. I love it. I think they have an amazing business acumen and support. One of the things that, our organization, it's a free resource for organizations to come in and develop and coordinate and activate. And, having those resources and capabilities is so critical. But, we've already touched on it, but we need more workers. And that's a big factor, just point blank.
Yeah, and I think for me to add to that is, Utah's a great place. Like I'm from here, but I moved back east for a while, which I love that too. I tend to love, I think, wherever I go. But I love being here. My husband wanted to be here, and once we started having children, now he talks about moving back east. I'm like, are you crazy? Because now I have grandchildren and they're all here, and that's the best thing. But I think, Utah is great. And what I love about is that we're changing. We have more people coming in. We're diversifying more. And so all of those things are so great. and and I love being here. And I think when I look ahead, again, like Angela said, we're also for Utah companies, we are a state resource. So check with us. I mean, there's some people that get someone else to help them with their grants and they pay money, and we will help you for free as long as you're based here. And so we love to see people coming here and all the ththings that are happening. And that's what we're doing. And when I look ahead, I mean, I think it's an exciting time for Utah. There's so much going on. There's the BioHive in life sciences. There's Silicon Slopes. There's so many amazing initiatives and efforts going on, and I just love being here and being part of this ecosystem.
Yeah, and I'll just follow up. When we were thinking about where we wanted to locate Metrodora, so this is a destination medical clinic, right? So people are going to be traveling from all over. But also the science piece was really integral for us. And so Utah has been fabulous, right? There are no cities that we could think of that have sort of the access to culture and outdoor activities and an international airport, and yet you can have, your business situated 10 minutes from the airport, 10 minutes from central, business district. And it's 10 minutes no matter what time of day, right? So people are like, why don't you want to come to Los Angeles? And I'm like, and because it's just not predictable, it's not reliable, right? The other thing has been the collaboration, the openness, the fact that we can meet with someone so easily from the governor's office who's willing to help us with questions that we have. This doesn't happen in other places as easily. And there's just a great community here. I find that people, again, want to be part of teams, part of something, so they're super motivated. It's just a wonderful place to live and to work.
So I'm very new to Utah. I actually moved here about 1.5 years ago from Capitol Hill, DC, so I know all about traffic, and it's great to not have as much traffic here. But I do think it's great that we can get places very quickly. One thing that really, really surprised me about Utah, I didn't know much about Utah before moving here, is that there are tons of technology incubation here, right? There's Catalyst Campus, there's Silicon Slopes, right? Cyber, like all of these really cool things that I had no idea existed in Utah. I never would have thought of that, right? And that is so cool. Like you can go work on a technology project and then go skiing in the afternoon, and people live that culture here. So I think it's super cool to see that. And I just had no idea Utah was such a big tech hub until coming here. And I just am thrilled by the amount of community outreach and inspiration to the next generation that has really happened in Utah. And it's just made me want to stay here even longer.
I love it. I'm from Boise, Idaho. It's very similar. It's great. Moved down to the big city here. It's wild. So the last question I want to pose is, the broader question I told all of you yesterday was, what developments in your field will make the biggest impact on our lives in the next 10 years or the next 20? And I want to refine that a little bit and just say, what technological advancements are you most excited about today?
I'll start. So as Shandana mentioned in her opening comments, was that it was 30 years ago we started the pursuit towards solving the human genome. It was 20 years ago that we actually got our first full genome of a human. But what has been interesting in the 2 decades that have followed, the impact of the genomics era actually hasn't come to bear, right? However, there are major advancements that are happening. So just last year, DeepMind's AlphaFold solved the protein structure prediction problem. And the reason that this matters for genomics is that at the time of AlphaFold's discovery, we had structures for less than 20% of the genes in the human genome. And the structure of a protein actually helps us understand the function. And so there was so little known, even though we had sort of the linear sequence of the genome, about what the biology was, right? So this is a major advancement. We are on the precipice of really being able to practice personalized medicine. So the cost of a genome, so the first human genome, right, I think it was $4 billion approximately. We're in the era where now this is in hundreds of dollars. So we can change the landscape for people. So we can start to get everyone sequenced. We can do it before they become ill, right? So we can start to practice truly personalized medicine, preventative medicine, prescriptive medicine. So if we know you have a risk for a particular disorder, we can be proactive about it. It's just, this is the thing that I'm just so excited about. And this is technology really bringing medicine to sort of the leading edge of science.
Can you solve the problem of the common cold while you're doing that? Because that sounds a lot more complicated than the cold, and yet we still have issues. No, I'm just giving you that. No, I think personalized medicine, I worked for a while in the medical device world, and dealing with personalized medicine, I think, is an amazing, cool things and how you can do that. I think just from our perspective, one of the biggest factors is going to be batteries. As you're looking at batteries, vehicles, whether they're cars, flying cars, drones, delivery systems, batteries are complex and difficult. And right now we have issues that there's a capacity, so they don't last long enough. They weigh a ton. They have a ton of rare earth metals, which is not fun because guess where all those come from? China and Russia. And as well as how do we, I think a lot of people, when they're developing their systems, they look at the battery itself and talk about how clean it is, right? Tesla, your cars, they don't burn anything. I'm here to tell you those batteries are really, really toxic. So how do we deal with the toxicity and reusability and recycling of batteries so that they're not going to be so bad on the environment when we're done with them?
Okay. Yeah, I really think just with digital technology nowadays, we're going to solve some really tough problems, right? In Northrop, we're building aircraft, spacecraft, and we have to be able to digitize that information very quickly to develop that rapid technology to explore space, to explore land, air, everything in between. And I think we're really going to evolutionize, I guess, how we do digital threading, digital replication, digital building blocks to these complex solutions so that you can visualize the problem at hand and see things that you couldn't see when it's built, right? And how do you run certain missions through these digital environments and these digital ecosystems and fail fast? So from my perspective, it's just those more complex systems that are going to get even more complex, and we need to reduce that cognitive burden on folks like our rocket scientists, right? So that they can solve the next harder problem.
And I was just going to add, I think, am I on? Yeah, there I am. I'm just amazed at all the technologies that are being developed. And when I look ahead, from simulation to medical advances, there's so many amazing things. And we get to understand or see so much of that. But from a personal point, when I think of medical advances, I lost my dad a little over 30 years ago to a heart attack, a massive heart attack. My mom, 15 years later, had a brain aneurysm. My sister followed like 3 years later, and she had cancer, and she passed away. And then 6 weeks later, I lost my other sister, and she had bleeding at her brainstem. And so then I made a deal with my brother that he would hang around, but then he also had a brain aneurysm just about 2.5 years after that. So 10 years ago, I've lost all my family. So when I think of medical advances, and it gets personal with me, it's so amazing when because I think of the future of everyone, right? And we all want to be healthy, we want a better climate, we want better technologies, and that's what I'm about.
Thank you all. This has just been a fantastic panel. And I really appreciate the final insights. I'm going into a meeting with my partners in the next week, kind of discussing themes we'd like to invest behind. And, well, I've got some ideas here. It's great. Fantastic. Did all my work for me.
You're welcome.
We started a little early, so we have a little under 10 minutes. And I'd like to open it up to, maybe a couple of questions from the audience, if interested. If not, no worries. But if anybody's got something burning that they'd like to ask the panel, please raise your hand, and we'll, right here. All right, fantastic. Oh.
Thanks for a great discussion. I'm Josh Schiffman with Peel, or Elephant Therapeutics, my favorite animal. elephant. Here's my question to the panel. Metrodora sounds amazing. I want to learn more about it, and maybe sort of like a sample, a test case for this is, what you're talking about is a lot of research and discovery and databases and adding to the overall knowledge base to drive tech forward. How do you commercialize that to support it, to keep it going?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the ways that we're thinking about it, because traditionally, I guess I'll just back up. Traditionally, sort of in these disease spaces that affect particular populations, it's usually funded through foundations, right? And so there isn't that sustainability piece to it. But the point that I was making earlier about having really high quality, rigorously collected data, that's actually a way that we can, in the early phases, capitalize on that. Because what we can do is we can share this data with organizations that have technologies to analyze it and glean insights from it that we don't have, right? But we know it's high quality data. We're reducing the noise. The same with biospecimens. Because of the way we're collecting them, we're going to be a great research partner for organizations that want to move forward and maybe test a particular drug or test a particular platform, right? Because we have these really rigorously collected data samples. And so that's sort of our initial piece. If we are successful in discovering things, and actually I don't want to say if, when, then we will need partners that help us create these verticals and roll those out. That's not my expertise, right? And so it's actually finding and building these networks of people who have all these different skill sets that will make us ultimately successful.
And commercialization is an important part, right, Josh? And I don't know, you maybe can tell us a few stories of how to do that. But like in the world that we live in, you get the research and development, you prove it. It's all about having partners. And part of these programs, SBIR, they require, well, they don't require, we strongly suggest you've already talked to potential customers. So you have partners lined up. You have someone that if we prove this and we show this, that someone's willing to partner with us or be our customer. And so that's the great question. And you might have answers to that too.
Yeah, this is a broader discussion.
So get his contact information and get a hold of him.
It's easy, jack@epicvc.com. Very easy. Any other questions? Back here.
So right now we're seeing a huge shift in academics where a lot of the younger generation is kind of recognizing it as a giant pyramid scheme. How do you target these people to bring over the technology and bring them into academic systems? I know that a lot of my colleagues really want to deal with that and they really don't know how.
So maybe to refine the question, it's education outside of traditional academic norms, or jobs outside of traditional outside of that traditional route. Any thoughts?
Say that one more time. How do we get kids not doing the traditional route, but?
We see a lot of people getting advanced degrees in academics, and there's no jobs for them, but they don't recognize that. How do you target them specifically to bring that massive talent pool over to the biotech and technology sector?
And say, stop getting your PhD, come join the. No, I'm just giving you a bad time. No, careful, I have a PhD. No, I think it comes back to this idea that they don't know what they don't know, right? And so a lot of people, I see my professors, oh, that looks cool. They're doing cool stuff. So, okay, that's just what they're doing, right? They don't know these other routes. And one of the things we need to do is we need to work with school counselors, right? So it doesn't matter what your passion is, technology is a part of it. If you like theater, guess what? There's so much engineering into sound engineering, into even on the playbill dealing with the set and pulley systems now, because there's a lot of complexity associated with that, right? So I think a lot of it comes back again to this heart of how do we teach people young that you can do anything and do it with technology. And you don't have to just go, right? Because a lot of people, one of the things I was taught was, hey, if you go be a professor, first off, you have flexibility, you have your summers off, and you can pick anything you want to do research in, right? Well, gosh, that sounds like the best of every world. But sitting there and coming back and saying, guess what, you can pick and what you want and go into these different organizations and work on different things. I mean, even working at Northrop Grumman, right? I grew up working at Boeing for a long time in my career, but I worked on so many different projects and different aspects, from human engineering to dealing with structural health monitoring to dealing with different things. And being an engineer, quite honestly, I think, okay, sorry, but I think being a mechanical engineer is the coolest thing in the entire world. Because I worked in aerospace, I'm a rocket scientist. I also went and worked in the medical device field and helped develop infusion device systems. I've worked in academics. I'm consulting. I'm teaching and working, right? I think it's teaching people about possibility that gives them that spark of, oh, hey, I can go, and and confidence factor.
I was thinking too, I met somebody the other day and he got his degree in history, and he said there's really not much he loved history. He goes, there's not much you can do with history, so he became a salesman somewhere. I think he does software sales. But I thought, there's so many possibilities, and it's all about mentoring, right, and who you talk to. Because I think of, too, the decisions I made in my life were based on who I was talking to and the things that they would say. So if we can get the messaging out that you could have a degree in something that you love, but it can also transition. I always think of it, it's like a jumping board or a diving board, right? You're going to dive full into something that there's so many opportunities. And I think it's about getting the word out about all that's going on.
Well, I think we're all out of time. So Linda, Laura, Angela, Mandy, thank you so much for your time. This is a fantastic conversation. I have a bunch of notes here that are great for me. And again, we really appreciate all of your insights.